Can't you just treat him? We have a flight to catch." My wife said those words about me while I was strapped to a gurney, my heart quitting inside my chest. 16 years of marriage, and that was her answer to, "He's dying." I heard it through a phone the paramedic was holding to my ear, and I promise you that sentence did more damage than the heart attack ever could. But here's what Vanessa didn't know: I was still conscious. And I remembered every single word. What she and her son did next, and what I did back, changed all of us forever. Before we go on, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Are you watching from Texas, Florida, Ohio? Let me know, and if a man refusing to be discarded is a story you want to see through to the end, hit subscribe and stay with me, because this is only where it begins. Part 1. My name is Daniel Whitmore. I was 68 years old the morning my chest tried to kill me. And I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened. I was not a weak man. I built a technology company in Seattle from a rented desk and a folding chair. I slept in that office for the first 2 years of its life because I couldn't afford both rent and a bed. 40 years. 40 years of building. And it took my wife exactly one sentence to make me feel like none of it had ever mattered. It started like any Tuesday. I was in my office by 6:30, the way I'd been for 4 decades. Olivia, my business partner, the sharpest woman I've ever worked beside, had left a report on my desk, and I remember thinking I'd call her before the meeting to go over the numbers. That was my last ordinary thought. Then something reached into my chest and squeezed. I want to be honest with you about what that felt like, because I think a lot of you watching have either lived it or love someone who has. It wasn't sharp. It was heavy. Like a man sitting on my sternum, then 2 men, then the whole weight of a building. My left arm went cold and stupid. The room tilted. I reached for the phone and knocked over a coffee I'd poured maybe 90 seconds earlier, and I heard the mug shatter, and I thought, clear as day, Daniel. You are having a heart attack, and if you don't call now, you are going to die on this floor. I got one word out to my assistant before I went down. 9. She understood. Bless that young woman, she understood. She had the paramedics on the line before I hit the carpet. Now here's the part nobody tells you. When you're on that floor, you don't think about money. I had built an empire, and lying there, I couldn't have told you my own bank balance if you'd offered to save my life for it. You think about faces. You think about the people you built it all for. And the 2 faces I saw were Vanessa's and Ryan's. My wife, my stepson. I thought, they're going to be so scared. God, I was a fool. The paramedics were good. Fast, calm hands everywhere. One of them, a kid honestly couldn't have been 30, kept talking to me the whole time. Stay with me, Daniel. You're doing great, Daniel. We're gonna get you there. He kept using my name like it was a rope he was throwing me. I held on to it. In the ambulance, he said, "Is there someone we should call wife, kids?" "Vanessa." I managed. My wife. Her number's my phone. He found it. He dialed. And because I was hooked to a monitor and he needed his hands, he held the phone up near my head while he worked close enough that I could hear. It rang twice. "Hello." Vanessa's voice. Bright. Almost cheerful. I heard music behind her and laughter, and I realized later she was already at the airport lounge. "Mrs. Whitmore. This is Kevin. I'm a paramedic. I'm with your husband, Daniel. He's suffered a cardiac event, a heart attack, and we're transporting him to Swedish Medical right now. He's stable, but this is serious. How soon can you get to the hospital?" There was a pause. I want you to sit in that pause with me for a second. Because in that pause, I still believed. I still believed the woman I'd married would say, "Oh my God," and drop everything. My whole body was straining toward that pause, waiting for it the way you wait for water when you're dying of thirst. And then she said, "Wait, how serious? Like, is he actually in danger, or is this a precaution?" Kevin's jaw did something. I saw it. "Ma'am, he had a heart attack. He needs his family." Another pause. And I heard her turn away from the phone. I heard her say to somebody, to Ryan, it had to be Ryan. "It's Daniel. Something with his heart." And I heard Ryan's voice muffled ask something. and I heard her answer him before she answered the man trying to save my life. Then she came back on the line and said the words, "I will carry to my grave. Can't you just treat him? We have a flight to catch. It's a whole thing. We've had this booked for months. Is there paperwork I can just approve over the phone or something?" Kevin looked at me. He didn't mean to. His eyes just went to mine because I think he could tell I'd heard, and he didn't know what to do with his face. Neither did I. I said, and it came out as a whisper because that's all I had, "Hang up." He hesitated. "Hang up the phone." He ended the call. And in that ambulance, with a monitor screaming next to my ear and a stranger's hand on my chest, I felt something inside me that had nothing to do with the heart attack. I felt myself go quiet. You have to understand, I'm not a man who cries easy. I didn't cry when my first company folded. I didn't cry burying my own father. But I'll tell you what happened in that ambulance. Something old and warm that had been running in me for 16 years just switched off, like a furnace shutting down. And in its place came a cold I'd never felt before. Kevin said, real quiet, "You want me to try anybody else? You got a partner, a friend, anybody?" And that cold thing in me answered for me. Because you'd think in that moment I'd have said no, forget it, just get me to the hospital. But instead, a name came out of my mouth clear and steady, the first steady thing I'd said since I hit the floor. Olivia Carter, my business partner. Her number's under Liv. He called her. And I heard her answer. "Daniel." "Why are you calling from? Who is this?" "Ma'am, I'm a paramedic. Daniel's had a heart attack. We're heading to Swedish." I have never in my life heard someone move as fast as Olivia moved through that phone. I heard a chair scrape. I heard her already grabbing keys. She didn't ask if it was serious. She didn't ask about paperwork. The first words out of her mouth were, "Which entrance? Emergency. I'm 40 minutes out. I'm leaving right now. Tell him put the phone to him. Daniel, you listen to me. You do not get to check out today. You hear me? I did not put 20 years into that company to run it alone. Fight. I'm coming." And there it was. 2 phone calls. 2 women. One who'd shared my bed for 16 years and asked if she could approve my treatment by text so she wouldn't miss a flight. One who wasn't blood, wasn't married to me, owed me nothing, and was already in her car. That's the moment, folks. That's the exact moment my old life ended and my real one began. Not the heart attack. The 2 phone calls. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in a hospital bed with tubes in my arm and Olivia asleep in the chair beside me. She'd stayed all night. She woke up when I moved. Her eyes were red. "There he is," she said, and her voice cracked right in half on 3 little words, and this hard, brilliant woman who negotiated deals that made grown executives sweat. She put her hand over her mouth and just breathed for a second. "How long?" I asked. My throat felt like gravel. "Since yesterday morning. You've been in and out. They put in a stent. Doctor says you're lucky another 20 minutes and we'd be having a very different morning." She leaned forward. "Daniel, I have to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me, even though you're going to hate it." "Ask." "Where is your wife?" And you know what I did? I laughed. It hurt like hell laughing with a fresh stent in your heart, but I laughed because the alternative was something much worse. "On a plane?" I said. "Somewhere over the Pacific, I'd guess." Olivia's face did a thing I'd never seen it do. She's a controlled person. But right then, something moved across her face that was pure, undiluted fury, and she stood up out of that chair and walked to the window and stood with her back to me, and I could see her shoulders working like she was trying to hold something in. "She knows," Olivia said to the glass. "She knows you had a heart attack. She knows. And she got on the plane anyway. She asked the paramedic if she could approve my treatment over the phone so she wouldn't miss it." Olivia turned around, and I've replayed this 100 times what she said next because it was the first crack of light in the dark. "Daniel, I've known you 11 years. I've watched you give that woman everything. I've watched you treat Ryan like he came from your own body. I have bitten my tongue so many times it's a wonder I can still talk. So I'm only going to say this once, and then I'll drop it and get you a nurse." She came and stood at the foot of my bed. "They are not your family. They are your dependents, and there is a difference, and you are about to find out exactly how big it is." I didn't answer her. Because a part of me, the part that had loved Vanessa, the part that had walked Ryan into his first day of school when he was 7 years old and terrified, that part wasn't ready to hear it. But another part of me, the new cold part, was already listening. They came on the third day. I heard them before I saw them. You know how you can tell everything about a person's mood from their footsteps. Vanessa's heels came clicking down that hospital hallway at a pace that told me she was annoyed, not afraid. Fast, sharp, irritated. The sound of a woman who has been inconvenienced. The door opened, and there she was. 16 years of my life, standing in the doorway of the room where I'd nearly died, and the first thing I noticed was that she was tan. She'd gotten sun. She was carrying a designer bag I didn't recognize, which meant she'd bought it on the trip, which meant she'd gone shopping. She'd gone shopping. "Oh, Daniel," she said, and put on a face. "I want to be precise." She put on a face. I watched her do it. The mouth turned down, the eyes softened, the head tilted. It was a performance, and after 16 years, I could see the strings. "Look at you. Look at all these tubes. I've been worried sick." Behind her came Ryan, 29 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's rent, a suit I had paid for. He didn't put on a face. That was the thing about Ryan, he was too lazy or too arrogant to perform. He just walked in, glanced at the monitors like he was appraising a used car and said, "Hey Dan, you gave everybody a real scare." Everybody. Not me. Everybody. I looked at my wife. I looked at her tan and her new bag and her rehearsed sad face, and I made a decision right there in that bed that would change the next 6 months of all our lives. I decided to play weak. I let my eyes go a little unfocused. I let my voice come out thin and slow, slower than it needed to. "Vanessa," I breathed. "You came." "Of course I came," she said, rushing to the bed, taking my hand. Her hand was cold. The second we landed, I told Ryan, I said we have to go straight to Daniel. I don't even care about the bags. Olivia, who was sitting in the corner and whom Vanessa had pointedly not acknowledged, said in the flattest voice I have ever heard, "The flight was 6 days ago." The room went cold. Vanessa didn't even look at her. "We came back, Olivia. There were flights to rebook. It's not you wouldn't understand, you don't have a family." Then to me, softening again, "Don't listen to her, sweetheart. You need to rest." And here's where I learned what Olivia meant about dependence versus family. Because Ryan couldn't wait. He couldn't even give it a full 5 minutes. He pulled a chair up to my bed and he set a leather folder on the tray table across my lap, the one they use for meals, and he flipped it open and inside was a stack of documents. "Dan, I know this isn't the time," he said, in a voice that told me he thought it was exactly the time, but the company can't just sit there while you recover. There's decisions that need making. Vendors payroll the Henderson contract. So I had legal draw up a temporary authorization, just a power of attorney, real standard. Lets me keep the lights on and sign the stuff that can't wait. You just focus on getting better, and I'll handle everything. I looked down at the documents. Now, remember what I told you. 40 years. I have read more contracts than most attorneys. I have had people try to slip things past me in the fine print since before Ryan was born, and even doped up on whatever they had running into my arm, even with a stent 3 days old in my heart I could read. It was not a temporary power of attorney. Oh, the first page said that. The first page was beautiful. But I let my eyes drift down slow, playing the confused old man, and I read the parts they didn't want me reading. Section 4 wasn't temporary. It had no expiration date. Section 7 gave the holder authority to execute transfers, sales, and dispositions of company assets. Section 9, and this is the one that turned my blood to ice water. Section 9 named a successor authority in the event I was medically incapacitated, and the successor wasn't Ryan. It was Vanessa. They'd built a chain. Ryan gets control now, and if I got declared incapacitated, and who do you think would be pushing that declaration? It flowed to my wife. They weren't asking me to let Ryan keep the lights on. They were asking me to sign away my company to the two of them while I was too sick to know better. And I understood in one clean, cold moment that the vacation was never the betrayal. The vacation was just the tell. The vacation was them being so sure I was finished that they didn't even bother to hide it. Why cancel a trip for a man you've already decided is dead? I felt Vanessa's cold hand on mine. I heard her say gently, "It's just temporary, baby. Just sign where Ryan shows you and you can go back to sleep." And I want to tell you what I felt because it wasn't rage. Rage would have been easy. Rage I could have handled. What I felt was grief. Grief for the man I'd been 3 days ago. Grief for the 16 years. Grief for the little boy whose hand I'd held on his first day of school, who was now grown and sitting at my deathbed with a pen. But grief, I've learned, can make you sharper than rage ever will. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Harder than building the company. Harder than sleeping on that office floor. I smiled at them. "Ryan," I said, thin and slow and grateful, "you've always been so responsible. Your mother raised you right." I saw it. I saw the flicker of triumph pass between them quick, like a card dealt under the table. They thought they had me. "Where do I sign?" I said. Ryan practically leapt to hand me the pen. "Right here, Dan, and here, and initial these." I took the pen in my hand. I let it shake a little, not hard, just enough. And I brought it down toward the signature line, and Vanessa leaned in, and Ryan leaned in, and both of them were holding their breath, and I could smell her perfume, and his cologne, and underneath both of them, I swear I could smell the thing itself, the greed coming off them like heat. And then my hand went slack, and the pen rolled off the tray, and I let my eyes flutter, and I slurred. "I'm sorry. I'm the room spinning. I can't. I need to just. Daniel!" Vanessa's voice pitched up, and for 1 second, I heard real fear in it, and I understood the fear wasn't for me. It was for the signature she almost had. "Get the nurse," I mumbled. "Please. I'll sign. I'll sign when the room stops. I promise, son. I promise, just not right now." Olivia was already on her feet pressing the call button, and I have to hand it to her. She never broke character either. She played the concerned partner perfectly. "That's enough," she said sharply to Ryan. "Look at him. Put that away. What is wrong with you two? He can barely keep his eyes open." Ryan snatched the folder back, annoyed, trying to hide it. It's fine. There's no rush," he lied. And I heard the lie underneath it. "There's every rush, sign it, before he wakes up all the way." The nurse came in and shooed them toward the door, and Vanessa bent over me on the way out and kissed my forehead, and her lips were as cold as her hands, and she whispered, "We'll come back tomorrow, baby. You just get strong for me, and then we'll take care of all that boring paperwork." "Okay, I love you. I love you." 16 years I'd waited to stop hearing those words as anything other than the truth. And now I heard them for exactly what they were, a key turning in a lock, trying to open me up and empty me out. "I love you too," I whispered back. And God forgive me, I meant something by it. I meant goodbye. The door closed. Their footsteps went down the hall, hers clicking fast and satisfied, now the irritation gone. A woman who'd gotten what she came for, or thought she had. For a long minute, neither Olivia nor I said anything. The monitor beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rolled by. Then Olivia came and sat on the edge of my bed and looked at me and said quietly, "You read it." I read it. All of it. Section 9. I said, "Names Vanessa as successor authority if I'm declared incapacitated." Olivia closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet, and it wasn't grief in them, it was something fiercer. "So they're not just trying to run the company while you're down. They're building the trap door to take it for good." "Yes." "And you smiled at them. You smiled at them and asked where to sign." She shook her head slowly, and something like awe came into her voice. "Daniel Whitmore, you cold-blooded son of a gun. You let them think they'd won. I did more than that." I found her hand, her warm hand, the first warm hand that had touched me in that room, and I held it, and I felt the cold thing in my chest finally find a shape, finally find a purpose. The furnace hadn't just shut off. It had turned into something else, something that ran on a different kind of fuel. "Olivia," I said, and my voice wasn't thin and slow anymore. It was the voice I used to close deals the voice men across a table used to be afraid of. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it quietly, before they come back tomorrow." "Anything, you know that." That authorization Ryan brought it didn't come from nowhere. A document like that took weeks to draft, which means he's been planning this, which means there's a trail. Emails, calls, maybe he's already talked to people about the company. I felt my heart pushing against the new stent, steady alive mine. "I want you to find out who Ryan has been talking to. I want to know if my stepson has been trying to sell pieces of what I built while he waited for me to die." Olivia went very still. "You think he's already moving on it?" "I think," I said, "that a man who won't cancel a vacation for a heart attack has already spent the money in his head. And people who've already spent the money get impatient. They make calls. They leave tracks." I looked at the ceiling, at the tiles, at the little water stain up in the corner that I'd been staring at for 3 days, and I made myself a promise on that stain. They think I'm a weak old man in a bed. Let them keep thinking it. Let them come back tomorrow with their pen. I'll shake, and I'll mumble, and I'll almost sign every single day for as long as I need to. And while they think they're winning, I said, "You and I are going to find out exactly how deep this goes. And then Olivia, then I'm going to stand up out of this bed, and I am going to take back every single thing they've already divided up between them in their heads." Olivia stood. She smoothed her jacket the way she always did before a meeting she intended to win, and she looked down at me with the closest thing to a smile I'd seen since I woke up in that room. "I'll start tonight," she said. "You rest. You're going to need your strength. Not for them." She paused at the door. "For what comes after them." She left. And I lay there in this dark, hooked to the machines, 68 years old, with a mended heart, and a marriage that had died 3 days before I did, and I felt more awake than I had in 16 years. They had made one mistake, just one. They forgot who they were dealing with. They looked at me and saw a sick old man they could roll over a wallet with a pulse they were finally free to empty. They forgot that before I was Vanessa's husband, before I was Ryan's meal ticket, before any of it, I was a man who built an empire from a folding chair and a rented desk, who slept on a floor and never once let anyone see him break. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 3 days, I slept like a man with nothing left to lose and everything left to take back. Olivia started that same night, and by the time the first gray light came through my hospital window the next morning, she had something. She came in early before visiting hours, before Vanessa and Ryan could show up with their pen and their sad faces. She had 2 cups of coffee and a look on her face I'd only seen a handful of times in 11 years, the look she got right before she buried somebody at a negotiating table. "How do you feel?" she asked, setting the coffee down where I couldn't reach it because the nurses had me on restrictions. "Like a man who slept 4 hours and wants to work," I said. "Talk to me." She pulled the chair close and dropped her voice, even though the door was shut. "I called Marcus in IT last night. Told him it was a security audit, didn't say why didn't have to. He owes you his whole career, and he doesn't ask questions. I had him pull Ryan's company email activity for the last 90 days. She paused. "Daniel, Ryan's been busy." My chest did something, and it wasn't the stent. "How busy?" "He's had 11 meetings in the last 2 months that never went on any calendar I can see. Off book. But he used his company email to book the conference rooms because he's not as smart as he thinks he is." She pulled out her phone and turned it toward me. "Recognize that name?" I looked at the screen, and I felt the floor drop out of my stomach. "Prescott Holdings," I said. "Prescott Holdings. Now I have to explain something to you, because if you don't understand who Prescott is, you won't understand why my hands went cold looking at that phone. Gerald Prescott had been trying to buy pieces of my company for 9 years. Not the good pieces. Gerald didn't want to build anything. Gerald was a stripper. He bought companies, gutted them, sold the parts, and left the workers standing in a parking lot with a box of their things. I'd turned him down 4 times. The last time, 3 years ago, he'd leaned across a table and told me, "Daniel, you're not going to live forever, and whoever inherits this won't have your sentimentality." And I'd laughed in his face and shown him the door. He'd been right. That was the part that hollowed me out. He'd been right about everything. "Ryan met with Prescott's people 3 times, Olivia said quietly. "The last meeting was 8 days ago." 8 days ago. I did the math and it made me sick. "That's before my heart attack." "That's before your heart attack," she confirmed. "He wasn't waiting for you to get sick, Daniel. He was already selling. Your heart attack just made his timeline easier." I lay back against the pillow and stared at that water stain on the ceiling. My old friend and I let the truth of it settle into me like cold water finding the low places. My stepson hadn't panicked when I collapsed. My stepson had celebrated. Because a sick man is easier to declare incapacitated than a healthy one. My heart attack hadn't ruined their plan. My heart attack had completed it. "I need to see the emails," I said. "The actual emails, not just the meeting names. Marcus is pulling them. But there's a problem." Olivia hesitated, and Olivia doesn't hesitate. "The emails from the last 2 weeks, the ones right around your heart attack, they're gone. Deleted. Not from the calendar bookings, he missed those, but the actual correspondence with Prescott wiped clean off his account." "Then it's gone." "It's not gone." And now she almost smiled. "Because your company email server keeps a backup for legal compliance. Ryan doesn't have access to that. You do. Or technically the CEO does, and last I checked, that's still you." She leaned in. "But I can't pull it from here. I need you to sign an authorization. A real one. Giving me server access. And I need to do it before they get you to sign their paper, because the second Ryan has power of attorney, he can lock me out of everything." I understood exactly what she was saying. It was a race now. 2 documents, 2 futures. Whichever one got signed first won. "Give me the pen," I said. "And here's the thing I want you to sit with." 2 days earlier, I'd faked a shaking hand and let a pen roll off a tray to keep from signing away my life. Now I took Olivia's pen and I signed my name so clean and so hard I nearly tore the paper, and my hand didn't shake even a little. And I felt something come back into my body that had been missing since I hit that office floor. I felt like myself. Olivia took the signed page, folded it, and slid it into her jacket. "I'll have the backups by tonight." "Good. Because—" The footsteps in the hall stopped me cold. Heels. Fast. Sharp. Vanessa. Olivia stood up so smooth you'd never have known we'd been strategizing, picked up both coffees, and by the time the door opened, she was halfway to it, playing the partner who'd just stopped by. "I'll let you rest, Daniel," she said, all professional warmth. "Vanessa, good to see you." Vanessa swept past her without a word, that new bag on her arm, and Ryan came in behind her, and this time, Ryan had the folder already open in his hands. They didn't waste any time. That was their arrogance, and God bless it, because their arrogance was going to be the thing that saved me. "How are we feeling, baby?" Vanessa cooed, and she came and sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. Cold, always cold, and I remembered how to become weak again. I let my shoulders drop. I let my eyes go soft and slow. I made myself small. "Better," I whispered. "The doctor said better." "That's wonderful. That's so wonderful." She squeezed my hand. "Because Ryan's been so worried about the company. Haven't you, Ryan? Everything's just piling up while you're in here. It's a lot of stress on him." On him. I'd nearly died, and the stress was on Ryan. "I don't want him stressed," I whispered. "Of course you don't. You're such a good man." She stroked my hand. "So maybe today we could just get that little bit of paperwork sorted, so Ryan can breathe. He hasn't been sleeping, Daniel. He's been carrying everything. I looked over at Ryan, who arranged his face into something he probably thought looked like exhaustion. And I want to tell you what I felt looking at that 29-year-old man in his $1,000 suit, pretending to lose sleep over a company he was actively selling to the one man on earth I'd sworn would never touch it. I felt calm, dead cold, patient calm. "Bring it here," I whispered. Ryan practically leapt. He set the folder on the tray table, that same meal tray, and flipped to the signature page and held out the pen, and I saw it again. That little flicker between him and his mother, that card dealt under the table. They thought this was the day. I took the pen. I brought it toward the page. And then I let my hand start to tremble, and I let my breathing go shallow, and I whispered, "Ryan, before I sign, I need to ask you something. Man to man." He blinked. "Sure, Dan, anything." "This authorization." I let my eyes drift over the page like I couldn't quite focus on it. "It's only temporary, right? Just till I'm back on my feet." "That's all it is," he said, smooth as glass. "Just keeps the lights on. The second you're back, it's yours again 100%. Nothing changes." And there it was. He looked me dead in my heart-attacked eyes 3 days after I nearly died, and he lied to my face without a single crack. That was the moment, folks. Not the phone call, not the documents. That was the moment the last piece of the little boy whose hand I'd held died inside me. Because a stranger can betray you. But it takes someone you raised to look you in the eye and lie that clean. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, then I'll—" And I let the pen slip. Let it roll. Let my eyes flutter. Oh no, the room, Vanessa. The room's going again. Daniel." Her voice pitched up that flash of fear that wasn't for me. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I can't not when it spins like this. I'll mess up the signature, and then it won't count, will it? It has to be right, doesn't it? Legally." And that landed. I watched it land. Because Ryan, for all his lying, knew that a signature from a man who looked visibly incapacitated could be challenged. He needed me to look competent enough that it would hold up, but weak enough that I wouldn't read it. It was a narrow window, and I was slamming it shut on his fingers, one fake dizzy spell at a time. No, you're right," Ryan said quickly, snatching the folder back, hiding his frustration behind concern. "Tomorrow's fine. Get your rest." "Tomorrow," Vanessa echoed and kissed my cold forehead with her cold lips. "You rest up, baby. We'll take care of everything tomorrow." They left. Her heels went down the hall, and this time they weren't satisfied. This time they were annoyed. 2 days in a row, I'd almost signed and slipped away at the last second. I could hear it in her step, the impatience, the frustration, the first thin crack of worry. Good, let her worry. The second the footsteps faded, I sat up straight and reached for the phone. That night, Olivia came back at 9, and she wasn't carrying coffee. She was carrying a laptop, and her face was pale. "I got the backups," she said, and shut the door and locked it. "Daniel, you need to see this, and I need you to keep your heart rate down because it's bad." She opened the laptop and turned it toward me, and I started to read. The first email was to Prescott's acquisitions director. It was from Ryan, dated 6 weeks ago, and the subject line was "Transition Planning Confidential." And in it, my stepson, the boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I put through a college he flunked out of, and I paid for. Anyway, laid out a plan to sell 40% of my company to the one man I hated most in the world, contingent on, and I'm going to quote it exactly, because I'll never forget it. The founder's expected reduction in day-to-day capacity in the coming months. Expected. 6 weeks ago. He'd written expected 6 weeks before my heart gave out. "He didn't know I'd have a heart attack," I said slowly, reading it again. "Did he?" Olivia's jaw tightened. "Keep reading. Next one." The next email was from Vanessa, to Ryan. And when I saw her name in the sender field, my whole body went still, because up until that second, a piece of me, a stupid 16 years married piece of me, had still been telling myself that maybe Vanessa didn't know. Maybe it was all Ryan. Maybe my wife was just careless and cold. But not this. The email killed that hope in one line. He's been complaining about chest pains for 2 weeks, Vanessa had written to her son. Won't see a doctor, you know how he is. Honestly, if something happens, it solves our timing problem. Don't push the Prescott thing too hard, yet just be ready. I read it 3 times. If something happens, it solves our timing problem. She knew. My wife knew I was having chest pains. For 2 weeks, I'd been telling her I felt tightness. I felt short of breath. And she'd told me I was working too hard, and to take an aspirin. And all the while, she was writing to her son that my dying would be convenient. I put the laptop down. My hands were steady, but something behind my eyes was not. Olivia reached out and put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything for a long moment. She just let me sit in it. I want you to hear me, she finally said very quietly. What you're feeling right now, that's the worst it's going to get. Right now, this second is the bottom. And I've watched you climb out of things worse than this. There's nothing worse than this, I said, and my voice cracked, and I hated that it cracked. Yes, there is. There's the version where you never found out. There's the version where you signed that paper on day 1 and lost everything and never knew why. That's worse. This, she tapped the laptop. This is a gift. It's ugly, but it's a gift. You know now. And knowing is the only thing that lets you win. She was right. God, she was right. That was the thing about Olivia. She could reach into the worst moment of your life and hand you a reason to stand up. How many people know about the Prescott deal? I asked, and my voice was coming back to me steadier now. Inside the company. Who else has Ryan pulled in? That's the thing. She scrolled. He's kept it tight. Just him, a lawyer he hired privately, not our firm, a boutique guy named Dell that nobody at the company knows, and Prescott's people. He hasn't looped in anyone on our board, which means the board doesn't know their own CFO is trying to sell the company out from under them. Right. Which means, I said, and I felt the dealmaker waking all the way up in me. Now the man who'd spent 40 years 3 moves ahead of everybody in the room. If I go to the board first before Ryan even knows I'm onto him, I'm not the sick old man begging them to trust me. I'm the CEO warning them their CFO is committing fraud. The whole story flips. Olivia sat back and looked at me, and slowly, that dangerous little smile came back to her face. There he is, she said softly. There's the man I signed up to work with. But then her smile faded, and she leaned in again. There's a catch, Daniel. A big one. To call an emergency board meeting, and to reverse the account access Ryan's already started setting up, and to freeze the Prescott discussions before they get to a signature, you can't do any of that from a hospital bed by phone. Legally, for it to be airtight, for it to survive every challenge those two are going to throw at it, you have to appear. In person, competent, sharp, in command. You have to walk into a room and be the Daniel Whitmore that everyone remembers, not the one lying here in a gown. When's the earliest I can be discharged? I asked your cardiologist, off the record. She winced. 6 days, minimum, and that's if everything goes perfectly. 6 days. How long, I asked, before Ryan realizes I'm never actually going to sign that paper? And there it was, the real clock, because we both knew the answer. 2 days, Olivia said. 3 at the most. He's already frustrated. When a man like Ryan gets frustrated, he stops being patient and he starts getting reckless. The second he decides you're not going to sign willingly, he moves to have me declared incapacitated. The successor clause, Section 9, the trapdoor. He gets a doctor to say I'm not competent, and then he doesn't need my signature at all. He and Vanessa take control through the courts. Yes, 6 days to be strong enough to walk into a boardroom. 2, maybe 3. Before my stepson stopped asking nicely and went to war. I lay there and did the math, and the math was bad. But you want to know something I learned in 40 years of building? The math is always bad. If the math were good, everybody would do it. The whole game is what you do when the math is bad. Then we make him wait, I said. How? The same way I've been doing it. I keep almost signing, every day. I get right up to the line and I get dizzy, and I apologize, and I promise tomorrow. As long as he thinks the signature is coming, he won't go to the courts because the court route is slower and messier, and it exposes him. Why would he take the hard road when he thinks the easy road is one more day away? I looked at her. I keep dangling the pen. I keep impatient. I buy the 6 days one fake dizzy spell at a time. Olivia stared at me. You're going to sit in that bed and let those two people walk in here every single day and lie to your face and put a pen in your hand knowing what you know now, and you're going to smile at them and play weak for 6 days. Yes. Daniel, that's... She stopped. She searched for the word. That's the coldest thing I've ever heard you say, and I mean that as the highest compliment I know how to give. And I'll be honest with you. She was right that it was cold. But it wasn't easy. I want you to understand that because I don't want you thinking I was some machine. Every morning for the next 6 days, my wife of 16 years was going to walk into that room and take my hand with her cold fingers and call me baby. And I was going to have to hold that hand. And remember, she'd written that my death would solve a timing problem. Every day that boy was going to look me in the eye and lie. And I was going to have to smile and thank him for being so responsible. It's one thing to be betrayed. It's another thing to have to perform gratitude toward the people betraying you day after day so you can save yourself. That's not cold. That's the hardest kind of warm there is. It's love that's learned exactly what it's worth and decided to survive anyway. There's one more thing, Olivia said, and she pulled a slim folder from her bag. While you're buying those 6 days, I'm going to build the case. Everything Marcus pulled everything on that server, the calendar bookings, the Prescott emails, Vanessa's message. I'm going to hand it to our attorney quietly and have him prepare everything. Emergency board resolution, account freeze, a cease and desist to Prescott, Ryan's termination for cause. It'll all be drafted and ready. And the day you walk out of this hospital, we don't waste an hour. We don't give them a chance to react. You walk out that door and straight into that boardroom and you fire the first shot before they even know there's a war. Blitzkrieg, I said. Blitzkrieg, she agreed. I reached out and gripped her hand, and I felt how warm it was, and I thought about the 2 phone calls again, the 2 women, the cold one on the plane, and the warm one already in her car. And I understood that the whole difference between losing my empire and keeping it came down to which hand I'd reached for when I was dying on that floor. I'd reached for the right one, barely, by instinct, and that instinct was going to save my life a second time. Olivia, I have to ask you something. I held her hand a little tighter. 16 years I was married to a woman who wrote that my death would be convenient. 11 years I worked next to you, and you slept in a hospital chair. How did I get it so wrong? How did I look at those 2 every single day and not see it? She didn't answer right away. She thought about it the way she thought about everything, carefully, honestly. Because you wanted a family, she said finally. So bad. You built all this. She gestured at nothing, at everything, at 40 years. And I think somewhere in you, there was still that man, sleeping on the office floor, who wanted more than any of it to come home to people who loved him. And when Vanessa and Ryan gave you a family, shaped like the one you wanted, you didn't look too close. You couldn't afford to. Looking too close might have meant it wasn't real. She squeezed my hand. That's not stupidity, Daniel. That's the loneliest kind of hope there is. And it's the most human thing about you. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because she'd named a thing in me I'd never had words for, and she'd named it gently. And there are moments a person hands you the truth so kindly that it undoes you more than any cruelty ever could. Get some sleep, she said, standing gathering the laptop. Tomorrow you've got a performance to give. 6 days of them. Best acting of your life. And then... She paused at the door, and her smile was pure steel now. And then you get to stop pretending. And I promise you, Daniel, watching you stop pretending is going to be the single most satisfying thing those 2 people have ever witnessed. Right before it's the worst. She left, and I lay in the dark, and I did not feel like a victim. I want you to understand that, because up until 3 days ago, I'd thought betrayal turns you into a victim, into something broken and small. It doesn't have to. It only does that if you let the betrayal be the end of the story. I decided lying there that it was going to be the middle. I ran it all through my mind one more time, the way I used to run through a deal the night before I closed it. 6 days of playing weak. Vanessa's cold hand every morning. Ryan's clean lies. The pen dangled and dropped, buying me time by the hour. Olivia in the shadows building the blade. The board who didn't yet know they were about to be handed a war. Prescott licking his lips somewhere across town, sure that after 9 years he was finally going to get his hands on the thing I'd told him he'd never touch. And Section 9, the trapdoor waiting under my feet with Ryan's hand on the lever growing more impatient by the day. 2 clocks running against each other. My recovery against his patience. 6 days against 2 or 3. It was going to be close. But I'd built an empire out of close. Close was where I lived. Close was home. I closed my eyes and I heard those 2 phone calls one last time before I slept. Can't you just treat him? We have a flight to catch and you do not get to check out today? I'm coming, and I let them play side by side, and I stopped being sad about the first one. Somewhere in those 6 days, I was going to stop grieving the marriage entirely and start using its corpse as a foundation. That's what 40 years teaches you. Nothing is wasted. Not even the worst thing that ever happened to you. Especially not that. The next morning, right on schedule, I heard the heels coming down the hall. I arranged my face. I let my shoulders drop. I became weak again one more time, and I got ready to smile at the people who wanted me dead. But this time, as the door opened, and Vanessa swept in with her cold hands and her warm lies, and Ryan trailing behind her with the folder already open, I noticed something I hadn't noticed the day before. Something small. Something in Ryan's face. He wasn't just impatient anymore. He was watching me differently, studying me, and when he set the folder down on the tray and held out the pen, he said something he hadn't said before in a voice that had lost every bit of its patience. A voice with something underneath it that made the machines next to my bed pick up their beeping, just a little. "Dan?" he said, and he smiled, and it did not reach his eyes at all. "Before you sign today, I brought someone with me. He's just outside. He's a doctor, a specialist, and he'd like to ask you a few questions first, just to make sure you're clear-headed enough for all this." And I understood in one ice-cold instant that my 2 or 3 days had just become 0. A doctor, a specialist, to ask me questions and make sure I was clear-headed enough to sign. I want you to understand what that meant, because in that one instant everything I'd planned collapsed. Ryan wasn't waiting for my signature anymore. He'd figured it out. 6 days of me almost signing and slipping away had told him what I was doing, or close enough. So he'd changed the game overnight. He didn't need me to sign willingly. He'd brought a doctor, his own doctor, a bought doctor. I had no doubt to ask me a few careful questions and then write down that Daniel Whitmore was not of sound mind. And once that was on paper, Section 9 opened up like a trapdoor under my feet and control flowed to Vanessa, and I lost everything, not in 6 days, but in the next 10 minutes. My heart was pounding. The monitor beside me picked it up and the numbers climbed, and I saw Vanessa's eyes flick to the screen and then back to me with something like satisfaction, because an agitated old man is exactly what a competency exam wants to find. And that was the thing that saved me. That little flick of her eyes, because it reminded me the worst thing I could do right now was panic. A panicking man fails a competency test. A confused man fails a competency test. The only man who passes is a calm one. So I did the hardest thing yet. With my heart slamming and my whole future about to fall through the floor, I made myself slow down. I made myself breathe. I let the numbers on the monitor come back down, and I turned to Ryan, and instead of the weak, mumbling old man I'd been playing for 6 days, I gave him something else entirely. I gave him a warm, tired, completely lucid smile. "A specialist," I said. "Clear. Easy." "That's thoughtful, Ryan. You know that's exactly the kind of careful thinking I've always admired in you." "Sure, bring him in. I'd love to talk to a doctor who isn't taking my blood pressure every 20 minutes. I watched the confidence stutter on his face. Because here's what Ryan hadn't planned for. He'd spent 6 days watching me be weak, and he'd built his whole ambush around a weak man. He'd told his doctor, "I'm sure that I was foggy slow, not all there." He'd primed the guy to find exactly that. And now the weak man had just sat up straight and welcomed the exam like he was inviting an old friend to lunch, and Ryan had no idea what to do with it. Ryan glanced at the door. He's just going to ask some standard things. Wonderful. I love standard things. I looked at Vanessa. Sweetheart, could you get me some water? My throat's dry and I want to be at my best for the doctor. The word best landed on her like a dropped plate. She got the water. Her hand wasn't as cold as usual because I think for the first time she was starting to sweat. The doctor came in. 50's expensive shoes, the kind of man who'd learned a long time ago that his signature was worth more than his stethoscope. He introduced himself as Dr. Aldridge, and he sat down beside my bed with a clipboard and a manner so falsely warm it made my skin crawl. And he began. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm just going to ask you a few simple questions. Nothing to worry about. Can you tell me what year it is?" 2026, I said. "And before you ask, it's a Thursday. We're in Swedish Medical Center in Seattle. The president is who he is, and I've had a stent placed in my left anterior descending artery 6 days ago, which the interventional cardiologist told me had a 95% blockage." I smiled at him. I read the chart when the nurse left it. I've been reading things people didn't want me to read my whole life. Shall we continue? Dr. Aldridge's pen stopped moving. Behind him, I saw Ryan's face go a shade paler. "That's very thorough," the doctor said. "Can you tell me, Mr. Whitmore, do you know why your son has brought certain documents for you to review?" And there it was, the trap question. He wasn't testing my memory. He was testing whether I understood the paperwork, because if I didn't understand it, I couldn't competently refuse it. And if I couldn't competently refuse it, they could act on my behalf. So I gave him the truth. All of it. Calm as a lake. I said. He's brought me a document he's described as a temporary power of attorney. But I've read it, doctor. Slowly over several days, because my medication makes me tired and I wanted to be careful. And I'd like to tell you what I found since you're a witness, and I think a witness is exactly what this room needs right now. The temperature in that room dropped 40 degrees. "Daniel," Vanessa said a warning in it, "you don't need to bore the doctor with Section 4. I continued looking right at Aldridge, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "Has no expiration date despite being called temporary. Section 7 grants the holder authority to sell company assets. And Section 9, this is the interesting one, doctor, you should write this down. Section 9 names my wife as successor authority in the event I'm declared medically incapacitated." I let that sit for one full second. "Which, correct me if I'm wrong, is precisely what you were brought here today to declare. So I have to ask you as one professional to another, did my stepson tell you when he hired you that your medical opinion would directly trigger a clause transferring control of a 9-figure company to his mother?" Dr. Aldridge's face did something wonderful. It went blank, and then it went scared because Dr. Aldridge had just learned that he'd been walked into fraud, and Dr. Aldridge had a license he liked very much. "I wasn't, nobody told me." He stood up, clutching his clipboard. "Mr. Whitmore appears entirely lucid. Entirely. I have no concerns about his competency whatsoever. In fact, I'd stake my license on it." He was practically backing toward the door. "Ryan, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding about the nature of this consult, and I'm going to need you to not contact me again." He was gone before Ryan could say a word. And now it was just the three of us. Me sitting up straight in that bed, fully present, fully awake, no more mumbling, no more dropped pens. And the two of them standing there realizing all at once that the weak old man they'd been circling for 6 days had never been weak at all. The silence went on a long time. Vanessa broke it. And I have to tell you, watching her face try to find the right expression was like watching someone shuffle a deck looking for a card that isn't in it. She tried tender. She tried confused. She landed finally on wounded. "Daniel," she whispered, You've been faking this whole time. You You let me sit here worried sick, and you were just testing us." Her eyes filled right on cue, and I'll give her this. The woman could produce tears like a faucet. "How could you do that to me after everything? And 6 days earlier that might have worked." That was the terrible thing. 6 days earlier, some starving piece of me would have grabbed at those tears like a lifeline. But I'd read the email. If something happens, it solves our timing problem. "After everything," I repeated softly. "You want to talk about after everything, Vanessa?" "Let's." 2 weeks before my heart attack, I told you I was having chest pains. Do you remember what you said?" Her tears paused, just for a flicker. But they paused. "You told me to take an aspirin," I said. "And then you sat down and wrote your son an email. Would you like me to tell you what it said? Because I have it. I have all of it." Every drop of color left her face. That was the moment she knew. Not suspected. Knew. That whatever I had, it was enough, and it was real, and it was already out of her reach. Ryan moved first. Ryan always did, because Ryan was the one who thought he was smart. He stepped forward and dropped the wounded son act completely, and his voice came out flat and hard, and much older than his 29 years. "What do you have?" he said. Not a question, a demand. "I have your emails to Prescott Holdings," I said, and I watched it hit him like a fist. "All 11 meetings. The transition plan you wrote 6 weeks ago, the one where you sold 40% of my company to a corporate raider contingent on my expected reduction in capacity." Expected Ryan. "You wrote expected 6 weeks before my heart gave out. I've been wondering about that word ever since I read it." I leaned forward and I let him see for the first time in 6 days exactly who he was actually dealing with. "So let me ask you the same thing I asked the doctor. Man to man, since you like that phrase, did you know about the chest pains? Did your mother tell you I was having them before you finalized that timeline?" And Ryan. God help him. Ryan hesitated. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I got my answer. And it was worse than anything the emails had said, because the emails were just words on a server, and this was a living silence in a hospital room, and it told me that these two people had looked at a man's failing heart and seen a calendar opening up. "You did?" I breathed. "You both did. You knew I was dying and you scheduled around it." "Nobody scheduled anything," Vanessa said quickly, too quickly. "Ryan don't. He's twisting it. He's always been able to twist things." "Get out," I said. I didn't yell it. "That's what I want you to understand. I'd learned a long time ago that the quietest thing in the room is the most powerful." I said it barely above a whisper, and it landed harder than a scream. "Daniel, get out of my room, both of you, right now." I reached over and I pressed the call button and I held it down. I'm going to have a very nice conversation with hospital security about two people who brought a fraudulent doctor into a cardiac patient's room to fake a competency ruling. And you're going to want to be gone before that conversation starts, because it's the kind of conversation that generates a police report. That word police did what nothing else had. Ryan grabbed his folder. Vanessa grabbed her bag. And for 1 second at the door, my wife of 16 years turned back and looked at me, and the mask came all the way off. And what was underneath wasn't sad, and it wasn't sorry. It was calculating. Already recalculating. Already asking herself what she could still salvage. "This isn't over," she said. "No." I agreed. "It's really not." They left. The heels went down the hall fast, not annoyed this time, not satisfied. Scared. Finally, genuinely scared. And I sat back against my pillows and my heart was going hard, and I pressed the button and told the nurse I was fine. False alarm, and I picked up my phone with a hand that was at last completely steady. And I called Olivia. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel, what's wrong? Your heart rate alert just..." "They brought a doctor," I said, "to declare me incompetent. This morning, 10 minutes ago." Silence. Then very controlled. And I passed his exam so hard, he quit on the spot and told Ryan never to contact him again. I couldn't help it. I laughed and it hurt, and I didn't care. "It's blown, Liv. The whole slow game. They know I know. They know I have the emails. It's a war now in the open starting right now today. I heard her stand up. I heard the keys again, that same sound from the ambulance 6 days ago. The sound of a person who moves when it matters. Then we move today, she said. Forget the 6 days. Forget waiting for discharge. Can you get out of that bed? I don't know. Maybe. The doctor said, not can you be discharged. Can you get out of the bed? Can you stand up, put on a suit, and walk into a boardroom this afternoon? Because if we wait even one more day, Ryan runs straight to a judge and tries the court route, and once a judge is involved, it gets slow and public and ugly, and Prescott will use the chaos to push the deal through while everyone's distracted. Her voice was pure velocity now. The only way to win clean is to move before they can react. We go to the board today. You appear. You're competent. You're furious. You're in command. You hand them the evidence yourself before Ryan can spin a single word of it. We fire the first shot and we don't stop firing. The cardiologist will lose his mind if I discharge myself. Then discharge yourself against medical advice. People do it every day. I'll have a nurse on standby. I'll have a car with a driver. I'll have your medication. I'll have a doctor of ours, a real one, meet us at the office in case anything happens. But Daniel. And here her voice caught, just for a second, the only crack in all that momentum. I'm not going to pretend it's safe. It's 6 days after a heart attack. Getting out of that bed to go win a war might be the most dangerous thing you've ever done, and I can't tell you to do it. I can only tell you that if you don't, I think you lose everything. So it's yours. It has to be yours. I looked at that water stain on the ceiling one last time. I thought about the office floor I slept on for 2 years. I thought about the folding chair. I thought about every impossible situation I'd walked into and out of over 40 years, every deal everyone told me was already lost. And I thought about a woman on a plane over the Pacific asking if she could approve my treatment by text. And I thought about her son writing expected 6 weeks before my heart broke. And I thought I did not survive that heart attack to lose to these two. Bring the car, I said. And Olivia, bring me the good suit, the charcoal one. If I'm going to walk into that room, I'm not walking in looking like a patient. I'm walking in looking like the man who built the whole thing. That's my answer, she said, and I could hear her already moving, already halfway out her door. 90 minutes. Be ready. I hung up. And I called the nurse in, and I told her I wanted to speak to the physician on duty about discharging against medical advice, and the poor woman looked at me like I'd lost my mind, and maybe I had. But there's a kind of losing your mind that's really just finding your spine. The doctor came and argued. I let him argue. He told me the risks, the strain, the blood pressure, the fresh stent, the chance of a second event. I listened to every word, and I signed the form anyway. Competent and clear-eyed, my hand steady as stone. And I want you to notice something. 6 days earlier, I'd faked a shaking hand to avoid a signature. Now I signed a form that might kill me without a tremor, because it was mine, because it was my choice, because after 16 years of other people trying to move my hand across a page, I was finally the one holding the pen. I got dressed. It took everything I had. My body was weaker than my will by a wide margin. And there was a moment sitting on the edge of that bed, with one arm through my shirt when the room swam for real, no acting, and I had to grip the rail and breathe and wait for it to pass. And in that moment, a small voice asked me if I was being a proud old fool, if I should lie back down and let the lawyers handle it slow and safe. And then I thought about Prescott. 9 years he'd been circling. 9 years since he leaned across that table and told me whoever inherited this wouldn't have my sentimentality. And I realized the worst thing that could happen wasn't dying in that boardroom. The worst thing that could happen was Gerald Prescott getting the company I built from a folding chair handed to him by a woman who wouldn't cancel a vacation, and a boy I raised who wrote expected. That got me to my feet. Olivia arrived in 85 minutes. She came through the door with a garment bag over her arm, and one look at me dressed upright gray in the face, but standing, and her eyes went bright and hard and proud all at once. "You look like hell," she said. "I feel like hell." "Good. Hell is exactly what we're about to bring. She handed me the garment bag. Charcoal suit, and I did one better. She pulled out a folder thick-tabbed, organized the work of 6 days of quiet nights. Everything. The Prescott emails, Vanessa's message, the calendar records, the fraudulent power of attorney with all 9 sections flagged, a drafted board resolution removing Ryan for cause, an account freeze order ready for your signature, and a cease and desist to Prescott Holdings that our attorney will fire the second you say go. She looked at me. I called an emergency board meeting for 4 o'clock. I told them it was a security and compliance matter and that the CEO would be present. I didn't tell them what. I wanted their faces honest when you walk in. 4 o'clock. I looked at the clock on the wall. 2 hours. Do they know I'm coming? I asked. Does Ryan? And Olivia smiled, and it was the coldest, most beautiful smile I have ever seen on a human face. Ryan thinks you're in a hospital bed, she said. Ryan thinks he has time to run to a judge in the morning. Ryan has no idea that in 2 hours you're going to walk through the boardroom door on your own, 2 feet 6 days after a heart attack, with his entire betrayal printed and tabbed in a folder. She helped me into the jacket. He made one mistake, Daniel. The same one his mother made on that plane. He decided you were already finished, and now he's about to learn what everyone who ever wrote you off has learned. She straightened my lapel, the way you'd straighten a soldier's collar before a battle. That a man who built an empire from nothing, she said quietly, is never ever finished until he says he is. I looked at myself. Charcoal suit, standing, alive, furious, ready. Let's go take it back, I said. And we walked out of that hospital room together, not the sick old man they'd left behind, not the wallet with a pulse, not the convenient timing problem. We walked out into that hallway past the nurse's station toward the elevator, and the car, and the boardroom, and the reckoning. And with every step, my legs got a little steadier, and my spine got a little straighter. And by the time those elevator doors opened, I wasn't leaning on anybody. I was walking on my own, straight toward the 2 people who thought they'd already won. The car ride to the office took 22 minutes, and I spent every one of them going over the folder while Olivia briefed me on the board. 9 members, she said, driving faster than she should have. You control 3 seats directly. I'm one. Harold's loyal, he's been with you since the 2nd year he'd walk through fire for you. That's 5, technically a majority. But majorities don't matter if the story's already been poisoned, and I don't know how many of them Ryan's gotten to. He's been CFO for 4 years, Daniel. He's had 4 years to make friends on that board while you were busy building things. Who worries you? 2 people. Sandra Pella. She came on last year, Ryan recommended her, and I've never trusted a board member who owes their seat to the person they're supposed to oversee. And Bill Dorsey. Bill's old money, old school, and Bill's been quietly nervous about the company's direction for a while. Ryan's been whispering in his ear that you're too old, too sentimental, that you're holding the company back. If Ryan's flipped Bill, then the story in that room isn't the CFO committed fraud. The story is the founder had a heart attack and came unglued, and thank God his responsible stepson was managing things. She glanced at me. That's what we're walking into. It's not a math problem. It's a story problem. Whoever tells the better story in that room wins, and Ryan's had 4 years, and you've had 6 days. I looked out the window at the city I'd spent 40 years building things in. Then I'd better tell a very good story, I said. We pulled into the parking garage at 3:40, 20 minutes to spare. And here's a small thing that I'll never forget, a thing that told me everything about how the next hour was going to go. As Olivia helped me out of the car, and I did need help. I won't lie about that, my legs were water, my phone buzzed. A text. From Vanessa. Daniel, please. Whatever you think you found, it's not what it looks like. Call me before you do anything you'll regret. I still love you. We can fix this. Please don't destroy our family over a misunderstanding. I read it twice. And then I did something I'm still a little proud of. I didn't answer it. I didn't get angry. I didn't fire back. I didn't let her pull me into a conversation where she'd have room to work. I just turned the phone face down in my pocket and let her wonder. because I'd finally learned the thing. It took me 16 years to learn you cannot reason your way out of a trap with the person who built it. The only move is to stop stepping into it. Vanessa, Olivia asked, watching my face. She wants to talk before I do anything I'll regret. Olivia snorted. The only thing you'd regret is talking to her. Come on, elevator's this way. We went up, and with every floor I felt the strangest thing happening in my body. The weakness was still there. God, it was there. My chest ached and my head swam, and I was running on nothing but adrenaline and rage and 6 days of planning. But underneath the weakness, something older and harder was coming back online. The deal maker, the builder, the man who used to walk into rooms full of people who'd already decided the answer was no and walk out with a yes. That man had been asleep for a long time, under 16 years of trying to be a good husband and a good father to people who were counting his heartbeats, and he was waking all the way up now. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor at 3:48, and the first person I saw was Ryan. He was standing outside the boardroom with his phone to his ear, and when those doors opened and he saw me standing dressed upright alive, walking toward him. Under my own power, I watched his entire face come apart. The phone dropped from his ear. His mouth opened. For one full second, my stepson looked at me like he was seeing a ghost, because in his mind, I was in a hospital bed, and dead men don't walk into boardrooms in charcoal suits. Dan, he said. What, you can't, you're supposed to be. In bed, I said, and I didn't slow down. I walked right past him toward the boardroom doors. Dying signing. Which one, Ryan? Which one was I supposed to be doing right now? You can't be here. He scrambled after me. This is a board matter. You discharged yourself. That's Vanessa said you weren't stable. You're not competent to. I stopped. I turned. And I looked at the boy I'd raised, and I said very quietly, say that word again, competent. Say it one more time. Because I just made a real doctor quit on the spot this morning by being so competent he was afraid of losing his license. Would you like to test it a second time in front of the entire board? Please, be my guest. Tell them I'm not competent. Let's find out together how that goes. He didn't say it again. Olivia opened the boardroom doors, and I walked in. 8 faces turned. 8 board members seated around the long table, and I watched the surprise ripple across all of them at once, because none of them had known I was coming. Olivia had made sure of that. I saw Harold, my old friend, half rise out of his chair with his hand pressed to his chest. I saw Sandra Pella go very still. I saw Bill Dorsey's eyebrows climb. And I saw in a couple of the faces something I hadn't expected: relief. Genuine relief. As if some of these people had been sitting in a room for the last week wondering what the hell was going on with their company. And here finally was the one man who might tell them. That relief was my opening, and I took it. Please. I said, don't get up. I know I look like I should be in a hospital bed. That's because 2 hours ago I was. I made my way to the head of the table, my chair, the one I'd sat in for years, and I lowered myself into it carefully, and I let them see that it cost me something, because honesty was the whole strategy now. 6 days ago, I had a heart attack in my office. A bad one. 95% blockage. They put a stent in my heart and told me I was 20 minutes from not being here at all. I looked around the table, meeting every eye. I discharged myself against medical advice 2 hours ago to be in this room, and I think when I'm done telling you why, you'll understand the risk was worth it. Ryan had followed me in. He was standing near the door, and he found his voice again, and he made his play the only play he had left, which was to get ahead of the story before I could tell it. He's not well, Ryan announced to the room, and his voice had that reasonable, concerned, sorrowful tone that liars use when they've practiced. I want everyone to understand what's happening here. My stepfather had a massive cardiac event. He's confused, he's emotional. He's not the man you all remember. Vanessa and I have been trying to protect him and protect this company during a very difficult time. And now he's discharged himself against doctor's orders and shown up here in a state that frankly breaks my heart to see. Dan, please. Let me take you home. This isn't you. It was good. I'll give him that. It was a good play, and I saw 2 or 3 faces around that table soften with sympathy. And for one dangerous second, I felt the story tilting his way. Because that's the terrible power of the concerned relative act. It turns your strength into a symptom. The more competent I looked, the more he could frame it as agitation. The angrier I got, the more it proved his point. He'd built a box where everything I did made his case for him. So I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I did the one thing that box couldn't hold. I got specific. Harold, I said, turning to my oldest friend on the board, ignoring Ryan completely. You've known me 38 years. I'm going to ask you to judge for yourself whether I'm confused. Olivia, hand out the folders, please. Olivia moved down the table, laying a folder in front of each board member. And I watched the room change. Because a confused old man doesn't come with tabbed, organized, indexed evidence. A confused old man doesn't have documentation. The mere physical existence of those folders started dismantling Ryan's story before anyone even opened one. Open to the first tab, I said. They opened. That is an email. I said, my voice steady and clear and carrying to every corner of that room. Sent 6 weeks ago from Ryan Whitmore, your CFO, to the Acquisitions Director of Prescott Holdings. In it, my stepson lays out a plan to sell 40% of this company, the company you all have a fiduciary duty to protect, to Gerald Prescott. A man I have turned down 4 times over 9 years because his entire business model is buying companies, gutting them, firing the workforce, and selling the pieces. Every one of you knows who Prescott is. Every one of you knows what he does. I let that sit. Read the highlighted line. Read what the sale was contingent on. I watched their eyes move down the page. I watched them reach the line. Contingent on the founder's expected reduction in day-to-day capacity in the coming months. And I watched Bill Dorsey, old school nervous, the man Olivia was most afraid Ryan had flipped. I watched Bill Dorsey's face go from skeptical to stone. Expected, I said quietly. He wrote, expected reduction in capacity 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks before my heart attack. Now I want to be very careful here because it's a serious thing to accuse a man of. So I'm not going to tell you what that word means. I'm going to show you the next tab and let you decide for yourselves. This is out of context. Ryan cut in, and his voice had climbed half an octave. You're taking a normal business exploration and making it sound sinister. CFOs explore options. That's literally my job. This is exactly the kind of paranoid misreading that... Second tab, I said over him, and I didn't even look at him. They turned to the second tab, and the room went absolutely silent because the second tab was Vanessa's email. To Ryan. He's been complaining about chest pains for 2 weeks. Won't see a doctor. Honestly, if something happens, it solves our timing problem. Don't push the Prescott thing too hard yet, just be ready. I let them read it. I let them read it twice. And then I spoke into that silence, and I kept my voice low, because I'd learned that the quietest voice in the room is the one everyone leans in to hear. 2 weeks before my heart attack. I said, I told my wife I was having chest pains. She told me to take an aspirin. And then she sat down and wrote to her son that if I died it would solve their timing problem. And she told him to be ready. I looked at Ryan now, finally straight at him. So when I ask what expected reduction in capacity means, Ryan, I think this table can answer it without my help. You didn't just plan to sell my company behind my back. You planned it around my death. You saw a man having chest pains, and you saw a calendar opening up. Something broke in the room then. I felt it. It was the sound of a story dying. Ryan's story. The confused old man, the concerned family, the responsible stepson. It couldn't survive in the same room as that email. Sympathy curdled into something else on face after face. Harold was looking at Ryan like he'd never seen him before. Sandra Pella, who owed Ryan her seat, had gone pale and was very deliberately not looking at him. And Bill Dorsey. Bill closed his folder and folded his hands on top of it and looked at Ryan with the flat, disgusted expression of a man who'd been lied to and had just realized it. Ryan felt it too. And a cornered man does one of two things. He either goes quiet or he goes for broke. Ryan went for broke. "You want to talk about betrayal?" he said, and his voice cracked, and the reasonable mask fell all the way off, and what was under it was ugly and young and furious. "You want to stand there and play the wounded father? You were never my father. You married my mom and you bought me things and you thought that made you dad. You put me through college and you never let me forget it. You gave me a job and you kept me under your thumb for 4 years, watching everything I did, never trusting me to run anything real. I built relationships. I found opportunities. I tried to move this company forward, and you treated me like a kid who couldn't be trusted with the keys. Prescott was a good deal. It was a smart deal. And the only reason it was contingent on you stepping back is because you were never going to step back, were you? You were going to sit in that chair until you died in it. So, yeah, I planned around that. Somebody had to. And there it was. The confession. Right there in front of 8 witnesses, my stepson admitted the entire thing while trying to justify it, which is the thing about people who believe they're the hero of their own story. Get them angry enough and they'll tell you everything, because in their mind, they've done nothing wrong. I let the silence hang after he finished. I let his own words ring in that room, and then I said very gently, "Thank you, Ryan." He blinked. "For what?" "For saying all of that in front of the board. You just saved me 20 minutes. I turned to the table. "You've now heard it from him directly. He planned to sell 40% of this company to Gerald Prescott, contingent on my incapacitation or death without the knowledge or approval of this board. That's not a business exploration. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. It's self-dealing, and depending on how the securities lawyers look at it, it may be considerably worse." Olivia stood, and now she was the closer, and I watched her work, and it was a beautiful thing. "I've prepared 3 resolutions," she said, sliding papers to the center of the table. "First, the immediate removal of Ryan Whitmore as Chief Financial Officer for cause. Second, an immediate freeze on all accounts and access privileges under his control pending a full forensic audit. Third, authorization for the company's counsel to issue a cease and desist to Prescott Holdings, terminating all discussions effective immediately." She looked around the table. "These require a board vote. I'd ask you to consider them now, while the CFO in question is standing in the room, so there can be no question of process." "You can't vote on this," Ryan said, and now there was real panic in it. "He's not stable. He discharged himself. This whole thing is Sandra. Sandra, tell them. You know me. You know I'd never—" "And Sandra, Pella, the board member who owed Ryan her seat, the one Olivia had warned me about." Sandra Pella looked up at him, and her voice was quiet and final. "I read the emails, Ryan," she said. "I'm not going to lose my own reputation defending yours. I vote in favor." That was the twist I hadn't seen coming, and it was the sweetest one. The person Ryan thought he owned was the first to turn, because people who trade in loyalty forget that the loyalty they buy can always be outbid by self-preservation. Sandra didn't owe Ryan anything anymore. Sandra owed herself. It went around the table. Harold in favor, his voice thick. Bill Dorsey in favor, one hard word. One after another, in favor, in favor, in favor. It wasn't even close. It wasn't 5-4. It was unanimous, every single hand, including the people I'd been afraid of, because in the end, the evidence didn't leave them anywhere to stand. "The resolutions pass," Olivia said. "All 3, unanimously. And Ryan?" I watched it happen in real time. Ryan stopped being a CFO. He stopped being a threat. In the space of about 10 seconds standing by that door, he became what he actually was, which was a 29-year-old man who'd gambled everything on his stepfather dying on schedule and lost. "Security's already on this floor," Olivia said, not unkindly, but not softly either. "They'll escort you to collect your personal items. Your access is revoked as of 30 seconds ago. Your company phone, your laptop, and your badge stay here." She paused. "And Ryan, I'd strongly advise you to speak to your own attorney before you speak to anyone else. Not the company's, your own. You're going to need one." He looked at me. One last time. And whatever he was hoping to find in my face. Mercy, hesitation. The old soft man who used to give him everything. It wasn't there. It couldn't be there. That man had died in an ambulance 6 days ago listening to a phone call. "You're really doing this," he said. To me. After everything. After everything, I said. Yes. They walked him out. And I sat in my chair at the head of that table, and I felt my heart going hard, too hard, and I put my hand flat on the folder to steady myself. And Olivia caught it, caught the strain on my face, and she moved to my side fast. "Daniel, your color. We need to get you—" "One more thing," I said, "before I sit down for a week. There's one more thing that has to happen today, and it can't wait, because if it waits until tomorrow, she'll have moved money and lawyered up, and it'll take a year." I looked up at the board. My wife Vanessa is a signatory on several personal and joint accounts, and she has authority on certain company-linked cards that were extended to her as a courtesy. As of this morning, she is also, by her own written words, a knowing participant in what you've all just seen. I want those courtesies revoked. Today, every card, every access, every privilege that flows through me. I'm not going to let the woman who wrote that my death would be convenient spend one more dollar of the money she was waiting for me to leave behind. Harold spoke up gently. "Daniel, that's a personal matter. That's your marriage. Are you sure you want to—" "Harold." I looked at my oldest friend. "There is no marriage. There hasn't been for a long time. I just couldn't see it. What there is a woman who watched me have chest pains for 2 weeks and hoped they'd finish the job. I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And I meant it. But I want to be honest with you about something because this is the part they don't tell you about winning." Even as I said those words, strong words, final words, the right words, some small, stubborn 16 years married part of me was breaking clean in half. Because you don't spend 16 years next to a person and feel nothing when you cut the last cord. It doesn't work that way. Even when they've earned every bit of it. Even when they wrote the email. There's a version of Vanessa that existed in my head, the version I married, the version I thought I was building all of this for, and I was killing that version right there in that boardroom, and it hurt. It hurt like the stent. It hurt like the heart attack. And I did it anyway because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is stop loving someone who was never really there. Olivia made the calls. Right there in front of the board, she got the bank on the line and the card companies, and one by one, the courtesies I'd extended to my wife over 16 years blinked out. It took less than an hour. 16 years undone in less than an hour, because that's how fast things fall when they were never really standing on anything. And somewhere across the city, I knew Vanessa's card was getting declined. Maybe at a restaurant, maybe at a store. Maybe she was standing at a counter right now, that new bag on her arm, watching a cashier shake her head, feeling for the very first time the thing I'd felt on that ambulance gurney, the floor giving way. My phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Face down in my pocket, buzzing and buzzing. I didn't have to look to know it was her. First the texts I imagined, then the calls, confusion. First, then panic, then fury, then the tears, then the apologies. The whole cycle she'd run on me 100 times over 16 years. Except this time, there was no one on the other end willing to be moved by it. I let it buzz. "Daniel." Olivia crouched down beside my chair, and the war was over in her voice now. And what was left was just worry and something warmer than worry. "You did it. It's done. All of it. The company's safe. Ryan's out, Prescott's getting his letter within the hour, and Vanessa can't touch a dime. You won. Now please, I am begging you, let me get the doctor in here because you are the color of that wall, and if you have another heart attack in this boardroom, I will never forgive you." I looked at her. This woman who wasn't my blood, wasn't my wife, owed me nothing, and had slept in a hospital chair and driven like a maniac and stayed up 6 nights building the blade that saved my life. "Olivia," I said. The 2 phone calls. From the ambulance. "Do you remember what you said when they put the phone to my ear?" She thought about it. "I told you that you didn't get to check out that day." "You did." And Vanessa 3 minutes earlier asked if she could treat me by text so she wouldn't miss a flight. I felt my throat tighten, and this time I didn't fight it. I've spent 40 years thinking I knew who my family was. And it turns out I found out in the space of 6 minutes in the back of an ambulance. The wrong person answered the first call, and the right person answered the second. I put my hand over hers. I reached for you by instinct, Liv. When I was dying, some part of me knew who to reach for even when the rest of me was too big a fool to see it, and that instinct saved everything, including me. Her eyes filled. This unshakable woman, and her eyes filled right there on the boardroom floor. "Get the doctor," I said gently. "You're right, I feel like hell. But get the doctor knowing this for the first time in a very long time. I'm not afraid of what happens next. Whatever my heart does in the next hour, I did the thing I needed to do first. I took it back, all of it. And no matter what, they can't undo what just happened in this room." She squeezed my hand hard once, and then she was up and moving, calling for the doctor she'd stationed downstairs, and the board members were gathering around, and Harold had his hand on my shoulder. And for the first time in 6 days, maybe for the first time in 16 years, I was surrounded by people who were actually genuinely afraid for me. Not for my money, not for my signature, for me, for the man in the chair. And as the doctor came hurrying through the door, and the room moved around me, and my heart pounded out its stubborn, wounded, absolutely alive rhythm, my phone buzzed one final time in my pocket and then went still. Vanessa giving up. Or Vanessa realizing that no amount of calling was going to reach a man who had finally, after 16 years, stopped answering. I closed my eyes, and I let the doctor take my wrist, and I thought, let her call. Let all of it come. The lawyers, the fights, the ugliness that was surely still ahead. I'd already won the only battle that ever mattered. I'd chosen the right hand to reach for. And this time, I'd lived to know it. The doctor did not let me go home that night. He took one look at my numbers in that boardroom and had me straight back to the hospital, and I spent 3 more days on a monitor while my heart, bless it, settled back into its stubborn rhythm. And I'll tell you, those 3 days were different from the 6 that came before. Because the first 6 days I'd been performing weakness while planning war. These 3 days I was just a tired old man who'd won letting himself finally rest. Olivia came every single day. Of course she did. But the thing I want to tell you about first is what happened on the second day. Because it's the twist I didn't see coming, and it changed how I understood everything. Vanessa came to the hospital. Not to my room, she couldn't. I'd left instructions at the desk, and after what she'd pulled with the fake doctor, the hospital took those instructions very seriously. But she came to the floor and she made a scene at the nurses' station, and one of the nurses came and told me a woman was out there asking to see me crying, saying she was my wife. And here's the thing. A week earlier, that would have wrecked me. The idea of Vanessa crying in a hallway kept away from me would have had me telling the nurse to let her in, because 16 years of instinct doesn't die easy. But I lay there, and I thought about it, and I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't tempted. Not even a little. The pull was just gone. Cut clean. Cut. Tell her. I said to the nurse that if she wants to talk to me, she can do it through my attorney. His name is on the card at the desk, and tell her. I stopped, and I thought about what to say, and I landed on the truth. Tell her I hope she finds whatever it is she's actually looking for. Because it was never me. The nurse went and delivered it. And I heard faintly down the hall the sound of Vanessa's voice going from tearful to sharp in about 4 seconds flat, that quick turn I knew so well, the tears drying up the instant they stopped working, the real person underneath showing through. She called me a few names. She told the nurse I was a cruel old man who'd abandoned his family. And then her heels went clicking away down that hallway one last time, fast and furious. And I lay there and listened to them fade, and you know what I felt? Relief. Pure, clean, uncomplicated relief. The sound of those heels leaving was the best sound I'd heard in years. That was the day I understood I was actually free. Not just legally, not just financially. Free in the place where it counts. Olivia came that evening and I told her about it, and she sat quiet for a while, and then she said something I've thought about 100 times since. "You know what the tragedy is," she said. "Not that she was fake. The tragedy is that she never had to be. You'd have given her everything you gave her without a single scheme. She could have just loved you, and she'd have had the whole life anyway, minus the part where she has to look over her shoulder for the rest of it. She burned down a mansion to steal a lamp she'd already been handed the keys to." She shook her head. "People like Vanessa don't lose because they're evil. They lose because they can't tell the difference between what's given and what's taken. And in the end, they always reach for the taken thing, even when the given thing is right there. I've never heard betrayal explained better than that. She could have just loved me. That's the whole thing. She could have just loved me." The legal fight came the way I knew it would. Vanessa's lawyer sent letters. She claimed her share of the marital assets, which fine she was entitled to. Something 16 years is 16 years, I never disputed that. But her lawyer got greedy the way lawyers do, and tried to claim she'd been an equal partner in building the company, that she deserved a piece of the business itself. And that's where the emails came back out. Because you can't stand in front of a judge and claim you were a devoted partner in a man's life's work, while there's a document with your name on it saying his death would solve a timing problem. My attorney didn't even have to argue hard. He just entered the emails into the record and let Vanessa's own words do the work. Her equal partner claim evaporated. She got a fair settlement based on the marriage. I made sure it was fair. I'm not a cruel man, whatever she told that nurse, but she got nothing of what she'd actually been reaching for. Nothing of the company. Nothing of the empire. She walked away with enough to live comfortably, and not $1 more, and the comfortable life she'd thought was her birthright was gone. Ryan was worse. Ryan's situation was worse because Ryan's problem wasn't a divorce, it was fraud. The forensic audit Olivia ordered turned up everything. The off-book meetings, the private lawyer, the deleted emails we'd recovered from the backup server, the whole architecture of a plan to sell the company out from under its own board. The board, once they saw the full picture, wasn't satisfied with just firing him. They referred it to the authorities because they had a fiduciary duty to, and because Ryan had genuinely broken laws, not just hearts. I could have intervened. I want you to know that. There was a moment where my attorney came to me and said, "If you want, you can ask the board to handle this quietly. Keep it civil. Let the boy walk away without a record. You raised him. It's your call." And I sat with that for a long time, because there was still a piece of me, smaller now, but there, that remembered a 7-year-old holding my hand on his first day of school, terrified, trusting me completely. That piece of me wanted to protect him one last time, but then I thought about the word, expected. And I thought about what it means to raise a boy for 20 years and have him look at your failing heart and see a calendar. And I made a decision that was the hardest of the whole affair, harder than discharging myself, harder than facing the board. I let it proceed. He needs to face what he did, I told my attorney. Not because I want him punished, because if I make this go away, I teach him one final time that there are no consequences for him as long as Dan cleans it up. I've been teaching him that lesson his whole life. It's part of how we got here. The most fatherly thing I have left to do for him is to finally let him face something himself. My voice caught. God help me, I hope it's the thing that saves him, because nothing I ever gave him did. Ryan took a plea. He avoided the worst of it, but he didn't walk away clean. He got probation restitution he'll be paying for years, and a fraud record that means no board in this country will ever hand him the keys to anything again. The thing he wanted most, to run something real, to be trusted, to step out of my shadow, he destroyed with his own hands, chasing it the wrong way. He wrote me a letter once about 4 months later. I have it still. It wasn't an apology, not really. Ryan wasn't built for those. It was more of an explanation, a justification, a long account of all the ways he felt I'd wronged him, wrapped around one single line near the end that I think was the truest thing he ever wrote to me. I don't know how to want something without taking it, and I understood then that Olivia had been right about both of them. Vanessa couldn't tell the difference between given and taken. And Ryan didn't know how to want a thing without stealing it. They were the same broken machine mother and son, and I'd spent 16 years pouring love into it and wondering why nothing ever filled up. I never answered the letter. Some things you have to let stay unanswered, not out of cruelty, out of the understanding that there's nothing you can say that will reach a person who's decided they're the victim of the crime they committed. Now here's where the story turns, and I want you to stay with me because this is the part that actually matters. Everything up to now was about what I lost and what I took back. But that's not what the story's really about. I figured that out slowly over the months that followed, and I want to give it to you the way I learned it. The company recovered. More than recovered, it thrived. It turned out that a CFO who'd been quietly steering toward a fire sale had been holding a lot of things back, and once he was gone, the whole place seemed to exhale. We promoted from within a young woman named Priya who'd been running circles around Ryan for years without the title. And within a year, she'd done more good than he'd done in 4. The Prescott threat died completely. Gerald sent one last feeler through an intermediary testing whether the old man was really back in charge, and I sent back a message that was just 2 words, which I'll let you imagine. He never called again. 9 years of circling, and he finally understood the answer was always going to be no, as long as I was breathing. But the company thriving isn't the happy ending. I want to be clear about that, because for 40 years I'd have told you it was. For 40 years I measured my worth in exactly one thing: what I could build, what I could provide, how big I could make the thing that had my name on it. I thought that was strength. I thought if I just built something large enough, no one could ever hurt me. The heart attack taught me that was backwards. The bigger you build, the more you have for the wrong people to reach for. Vanessa and Ryan didn't betray me despite everything I'd given them. They betrayed me because of it. The empire didn't protect me. It painted a target on me and called it a family. Real strength, it turned out, was the thing I almost died before I learned. It was the 2 phone calls. It was knowing who answers when you're on the floor. So I changed how I lived. Not dramatically, I didn't sell everything and move to a mountain. I'm not that kind of man. But I stopped mistaking transactions for relationships. I started paying attention to who showed up when there was nothing to gain. And the answer, once I actually looked, was humbling. There was Olivia, of course. There was Harold, who cried in that boardroom. There was my assistant, the young woman who'd heard me say 9 and moved fast enough to save my life, and who I made sure never wanted for anything again as long as she worked with me. There were people I'd overlooked for years because I was too busy pouring everything into 2 people who were counting my heartbeats. I threw a dinner about 8 months after the heart attack. Nothing fancy, just the people who'd actually stood by me. And I looked around that table at Olivia, at Harold, at Priya, at my assistant, and her husband, at a handful of others. And I realized I was looking at my family. My real one. The one I'd had all along and hadn't seen because I'd been so fixated on the counterfeit one that I couldn't recognize the genuine article sitting right in front of me. And Olivia. I have to tell you about Olivia because I know you've been wondering, and I'm not going to insult you by pretending you haven't. No, it's not what you think, or it wasn't for a long time. Olivia had been my partner and my friend for 11 years, and when a man's whole world has just proven itself to be a lie, the last thing he should do is turn around and dump all his need onto the nearest steady person. I knew that. She knew that. So for the better part of a year, we didn't name the thing that was there. We just kept showing up for each other the way we always had, except now I understood what it was worth. But I'll tell you the moment it changed, because it wasn't grand, and it wasn't romantic in the way movies mean. It was about a year out. We were in my kitchen of all places going over some board materials, and I'd made us coffee, and I handed her hers, and she took it, and her hand was warm. And I stopped, because I remembered Vanessa's cold hands. 16 years of cold hands. And here was this warm hand that had always been warm, that had been warm in a hospital chair, and warm on a boardroom floor, and warm every single day I'd been too foolish to notice. And something in me just quietly came home. Olivia, I said. I'm going to say something, and if it's wrong, we forget I said it and nothing changes because I'm not willing to lose you as my friend, you understand. That's the one thing I can't afford." She looked at me over her coffee, steady as ever. "Daniel Whitmore, we are both too old and have been through too much for you to be this nervous. Say it. When I was dying in that ambulance, I reached for you. Some instinct in me, deeper than 16 years of marriage, knew who to reach for." I took a breath. "I've been reaching for you for a year now and calling it business. I'm too old to keep lying to myself. I did enough of that with people who deserved the lies. You don't." She set down her coffee, and she said, "And this is the last twist, the one that made me laugh out loud in my own kitchen." She said, "Daniel, it took you a year. I've been standing here for a year. I was starting to think that heart attack knocked something loose. We were married 11 months after that. Small ceremony. Harold stood up for me. And I want you to understand something about marrying at 69 to a woman who married you for absolutely nothing you could provide because there was nothing left she couldn't get herself. She was a partner in the company. She had her own everything she needed, not one thing from me. And that was the whole point. For the first time in my life, I was loved by someone who could not possibly be after anything but me. There was nothing else to be after. She'd already earned all of it herself. Do you know what that does to a man who spent 40 years believing he was only worth what he could give? It rebuilds him. From the floor up, it rebuilds him. Vanessa remarried too, I heard. Some months after our divorce finalized. A man with money, naturally though, from what I understand, less than I had, which I imagine was its own small daily torment for her. I don't wish her ill. I truly don't. And that surprised me how completely the anger drained out once the fear was gone. I hope she's happy. I hope somewhere in her she someday understands what Olivia said, that she could have just loved me and had it all and never had to look over her shoulder. But I don't think she will. I think she'll reach for the taken thing for the rest of her life, and I think it'll keep turning to ash in her hands. And I think she'll never once understand why. And Ryan. I'll end on Ryan because he's the one that still costs me something. Last I heard, he's working again somewhere small, somewhere far from any keys to anything real. Paying off his restitution. Living the ordinary life he was so desperate to skip past. And I genuinely hope that ordinary life is the making of him. That having something taken from him finally teaches him the difference between wanting and stealing that all my giving never could. I hold no illusions. But I hold that hope. A man's allowed to hope for the boy whose hand he once held, even after everything. Especially after everything. People ask me sometimes, the ones who know the story, whether I regret it. Whether if I could go back, I'd want to not know. To have kept the comfortable lie. To have never read the email, never heard the phone call, gone on believing I had a wife and a son who loved me. And I always tell them the same thing. That heart attack was the best thing that ever happened to me. I know how that sounds. A man says the thing that nearly killed him was the best thing that ever happened to him, and you think he's lost his mind, or he's putting a brave face on a tragedy. But I mean it as plainly as I've ever meant anything. Because that heart attack cost me a counterfeit family and bought me a real one. It cost me a wife who wouldn't cancel a flight, and gave me a wife who slept in a hospital chair. It cost me a son who saw a calendar in my failing heart and gave me back myself. The man on the office floor. The man in the folding chair. The man who builds things from nothing and never ever quits. I was 68 years old, dying on the floor of the empire I'd built, when my wife asked if she could approve my treatment by text so she wouldn't miss her flight. And I want to tell every single person listening to this, everyone who's ever given their whole heart to people who only loved what your heart could buy them. I want to tell you the thing. It took me 68 years and a stopped heart to learn. The people who leave when you fall were never standing beside you. They were standing beside your bank account. Betrayal isn't the end of your story. It's the moment the truth finally gets loud enough for you to hear it. And walking away from people who only love what you have isn't losing your family. It's finally at long last finding yourself. My name is Daniel Whitmore. I lost a wife and a son and an empire's worth of illusions on the worst morning of my life. And I would not trade that morning for anything in this world, because it was the morning I stopped being what I could provide and started being who I actually am. I reached for the right hand when I was dying, and I have held on to it every single day since.